Cleveland Browns and the Indianapolis Colts. This is now out to 3.5, 40.5 is your total. Again, it's just the total of the week that we've got going with all these. So I played the Browns at 2, guys. I might come back in now on the other side of 3 and try and just middle this thing at 3. I'll be just full transparency since I can't get this thing now on the other side of 3. My thought is I wanted to take it at 2 on the off chance that Deshaun Watson was going to be back, and then I would probably get the line movement to be able to try to get this thing on the 3. That has played out at this point. Deshaun Watson, official list is questionable, was out there practicing today. We know he mouthed to the crowd at the end of last week, see you soon, whatever the hell that means, and whatever. More than anything, Steven, this is not a handicap about who even plays quarterback for the Browns for me. The reason I felt comfortable playing the Browns, even if he wasn't going to play while I was fine with taking the 2 anyway, is the fact that we saw last week what happens when Gardner Minshew is pressured a lot. And one thing we know about Cleveland, they live in the backfield. This defense lives in the backfield. He is going to get pressured, and he's going to get pressured a ton. And Gardner Minshew is a lifelong journeyman backup for a reason. And he wets the bed whenever he gets a ton of pressure on him. He's going to throw the ball to the Cleveland Browns a couple of different times in this game. And getting it at this number, I think is worth at least a small look on the Browns side, because I don't know how the Colts consistently move the ball up and down the field and score against this Browns defense.
I agree with you. This was a midweek play that I shared in the lines.com Discord. Free to join, top right-hand corner of the homepage. You can find the link to go in there. And we bet Cleveland minus 2.5. In the middle of the week when we first got the initial optimism that Deshaun Watson might be back this week. I agree with everything you're saying about Gardner Minshew. Adam, I want to ask you, if you have your numbers in front of you, what do you make this spread? And if you don't have them in front of you, just, if you have it, best guess.
Without an adjustment for Deshaun Watson, which I have to be honest, for me, is probably a point at most. Mm-hmm. I make it Cleveland 2. I would probably be comfortable going to Cleveland 3 based on Gardner Minshew, but I don't make it beyond that.
Yeah, so that's interesting to me, because there is a common data point here. And listen, markets adjust, team ratings change. But for what it's worth, there's a common data point here with Gardner Minshew playing the Ravens and Deshaun Watson playing the Ravens this year. And if you look at those closing spreads, you get Cleveland minus 5 or 5.5 on a neutral. If you were to give the Colts 2 points for home field advantage, you would get Cleveland minus 3.5 where we're at. I would not give the Colts 2 points of home field advantage. I think they have one of the worst home field advantages in the NFL. In fact, when I worked for the Colts, their head coach at the time, Chuck Pagano, straight up told me he thought they had one of the worst home field advantages in the NFL. There's just, when you're on the field there, the noise is not all that restrictive to a road team. So that's very different. I was curious because that's very different from what you just said, Adam. And I think that's just because we have a muddled quarterback situation on both sides here. But with how good the Cleveland defense is, and I'm not giving them all the credit in the world against the 49ers last week when they had a ton of injuries and a big wind game, but I think it's fair to say now that this is one of the elite defenses in the NFL. I'm just not sure they're the best, but against this matchup against Gardner Minshew, I'm perfectly happy laying under a field goal here with Cleveland.
So Adam, for me, if I knew we had a healthy Deshaun Watson, I actually had this 4.5 in favor of Cleveland, even on the road. So but obviously given what we know, I think the line is 3.5. I would still think that it's playable for me, given all the stuff that's kind of going on.
Is it fair to say we all think Deshaun Watson isn't some amazing quarterback, but maybe it's just about the fact that PJ Walker is like brutally bad?
Yeah. Oh, I rewatched that game, and it was a brutal performance. I mean, it was absolutely horrific watching what PJ Walker did. Now, that said, that is a different defense than what he gets this week, and the Colts should it be him, right? So there is that. Adam, what do you see here in Browns and Colts?
So I see where you're coming from with the 4.5 and making the adjustment for a healthy Deshaun Watson.
They're going with Brian. They're going with Brian Hoyer. It is not going to be Aiden O'Connell. So it is. It is Brian Hoyer for the Raiders this week. So if that changes your handicap at all,
unbelievable.
It is,
This organization is such a joke. This organization is such an absolute joke. This is Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler trying to save their jobs because they happen to have fluked their way into 3-3, and they want to be able to point to the fact that they somehow got to 4-3 near midseason because Brian Hoyer gives them a better chance to win this game this week. That is garbage. This team has no chance to go anywhere or do anything. They are fooling themselves. Devontae Adams has it right, and everybody else, including Josh freaking McDaniels, has it wrong.
And guess what? I'm glad we're on this game because another coming through. Deshaun Watson expected to start at Indy.
Okay.
So there it is. So Deshaun Watson expected to start.
So to me, I understand where your rating comes from on that, Matt. I think there's a couple things. First of all, I'm a little higher on the Indianapolis defense, I think, than most are. I see it pretty close to a top 10 defense in what they've been able to do so far this year, despite the fact that I don't know that it's a talent-rich defense by any stretch of the imagination. They got put in some really, really bad spots last week by Gardner Minshew and by the turnovers, right? Don't be fooled by what Jacksonville did in terms of the points last week because a lot of that was Gardner Minshew. And that, to me, is where we have to get to when it comes to handicapping this game because Gardner Minshew, the starter, by the numbers, is a hell of a lot different than Gardner Minshew, the backup. Let's go to the PFF numbers for this year. Last week, Gardner Minshew had 7 turnover-worthy plays. Do you know how hard it is to have that in one game? In one game.
Trevor Siemian,
7.
eat your heart out.
7 of his 55 attempts were turnover-worthy plays. The other game he started against Baltimore, he had 3 of them. All 10 of his turnover-worthy plays have come in the 2 games that he started. None in the games in which he came in relief of Anthony Richardson. In the games that he came in relief of Anthony Richardson, the yards per attempt, 7.4 and 11.1. Interesting. So when teams had to game plan for a running quarterback, it went a lot differently than when teams had to game plan for Gardner Minshew. Well, when teams had to game plan for Gardner Minshew, yards per attempt 5, yards per attempt 6, and he was awful in both of those games. So here's the way I want to get after this game because I don't trust that Deshaun Watson is healthy, and what I just said a few minutes ago about trying to handicap injured quarterbacks, I want to take Deshaun Watson and the Browns out of this entirely. This Cleveland defense isn't as far ahead of everyone as the Miami offense is ahead of everyone, but it's pretty far ahead of San Francisco by non-garbage time EPA as one of the best defenses that we have seen in a long time. The Indianapolis team total right now is 18.5. I do not see Indianapolis getting to 18.5 points against this Cleveland defense when we just saw what they did to the San Francisco 49ers, when we've seen what they have been able to do to just about everybody this year. So under Indianapolis team total 18.5.
Matt, final note for me. Me betting Cleveland minus 2.5 was not some uber confident bet that they're just amazingly better than the Colts and can cover this on the road.
Yeah.
It was really a numbers play getting ahead of Deshaun Watson movement. So
yeah, same.
If this,
same for me.
If this gets to 4.5 on Sunday, I may just middle this and say to hell with this game and try and middle a number with a low total.